Hi, my name is Dr. Janne Gaub, an assistant professor of criminal justice and criminology at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Today I'm going to talk about an article I co-wrote with two co-authors, Dr. Natalie Todak at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and Dr. Mike White at Arizona State University. The article today is "One Size Doesn't Fit All: The Deployment of Police Body-Worn Cameras to Specialty Units." It's currently in press at International Criminal Justice Review. In this article, we look at specialty units and how they are implemented in implementing body-worn cameras in these units, how they're deploying to them, the policies, the challenges that they face, the drawbacks that they see, the benefits that they see, just kind of really looking at how these units deal with body-worn cameras. So we conduct 17 focus groups with 72 officers assigned to specialty units in Spokane, Washington, and Tempe, Arizona. We look at three research questions. First, are the goals of a body-worn camera different for specialty units and patrol officers? Second, what unique challenges do specialty units present for implementing body-worn cameras? And third, are there discernible lessons for implementing or deploying body-worn cameras to specialty units more broadly? We look at these questions and this particular issue of specialty units because research in 6 or 7 decades of police research, it's pretty much exclusively focused on patrol. Specialty units are created within an agency to fulfill a specific purpose with narrowly defined roles. That can come for any number of reasons. It might meet pressures of a new or emerging crime. It might be driven by officer interests. It also could be in response to external pressure for a perceived crime problem that may or may not be present. But regardless, these specialty units are unique. They have very specific roles. They have very specific goals and mission and their purpose. And it varies based on organizational and community-based needs. And so it's unfortunate that most of the research in policing has focused primarily on patrol, though it's not surprising. Patrol is the front line, right? It's what people are going to see. It's who they're going to interact most of the time. They're going to interact with a police patrol officer, not with a specialty unit officer, with the exception of traffic. Body-worn camera research has followed basically that same trend. It's almost entirely focused on patrol. Again, not surprising. Most police departments implement body-worn cameras either starting or entirely with their patrol division. In many cases, specialty units may be included in that patrol division deployment, especially ones that are considered part of the patrol division. In our case, all of the units that we interviewed were considered part of the patrol division, with the exception of one in Tempe. It was the Criminal Investigations Bureau, it's the detectives. They are not considered part of the patrol division, but all of the rest of them were considered part of the patrol division, but did or did not receive cameras for various reasons. Both of these departments, Spokane and Tempe, implemented body-worn cameras using a randomized controlled trial design. So half of the officers were randomly determined to get body-worn cameras at time A, and the rest of them received the cameras 6 months later at time B. So you had phase 1 and phase 2, or group A and group B. They were in these semi-structured and focus groups that we conducted with these specialty units. We asked a series of 10 questions. They were semi-structured, so we did probe a little bit based on people's responses. It was really interesting talking to the units. They got particularly chatty as the time went on. And as they started to see that we were going to listen to what they had to say, they were very forthcoming with information. What we found is that most of the time when we asked them about benefits and drawbacks, they were very similar to the ones that we heard from patrol officers. For example, the evidentiary value, in particular related to complaints. The sergeants in these units were very supportive of body-worn cameras related to complaint resolution. And not surprisingly, especially those units that tended to have a lot of perhaps negative interactions with the public, and maybe generated kind of more of the complaints. Traffic officers tend to get a lot of complaints, and some other types of specific alternative patrol methods, they also get a lot of complaints. And so those sergeants tended to be very supportive of them. They also viewed them as useful for, helping with their report writing, and some of them indicated that it made people act better, and maybe themselves, that they acted better when they were being recorded. Some of the drawbacks, again, were also similar to those that we hear from patrol officers, but the specific benefits that we heard from specialty units were very interesting. We heard them as being very useful in an investigative role. Many of these specialty units, the Criminal Investigation Bureau in Tempe obviously works on investigations, but many of the other ones were higher skilled investigators and tended to be in detective roles. And so we're using them for investigative purposes. They also had very innovative uses that they would find for them. They might use them essentially as an extended way to view something outside of their range of view. So they might use it to look over a fence or into an attic without having to place themselves in harm's way. Being able to use the app on the phone to look at what they can see on the camera, so they didn't have to put their head in in the attic or over the fence, and being able to see things that they wouldn't normally be able to see. Being able to zip tie them to a pole, for example, and being able to talk to people who maybe are otherwise very erratic and not wanting to talk to the officers, but they can put the camera there and they could say, look, you can talk to the camera, and I'll step back, I'll be 10 feet back, and we can chat, right? And so they were able to use these in very innovative ways as needed for their particular specialty unit. They also valued the ability to document their de-escalation tactics and the extent that they went to try to help people and perhaps save lives, even if that didn't ultimately result in something that was a positive outcome. They were able to at least document the steps that they had taken to try to bring a positive outcome or resolution to the incident. They also mentioned significant uses for training. Some of these units are almost an alternative training unit for maybe evening or night shift units that don't normally work during the training units shift. And so some of these other units were able to kind of step in and help train some of those units using the body worn cameras as a tool in various ways. Canine units specifically liked using them. The master trainers found them very useful in trying to train the canines doing various things. They were able to see exactly how a dog is or is not responding to certain things. When a handler comes and says, the dog's not doing the X, they're able to say, see in this video where the dog isn't doing what I'm telling it to do, or it's not, the dog isn't responding in a certain way, or is responding in a way that they don't want it to respond. The trainers found it very helpful to be able to see that, kind of like your car. You take your car in and it never does what you want it to do. The dogs often responded that way too. They would say that something would happen, and then they'd bring them to the master trainer, and the dog would respond exactly as they were supposed to. So having the videos was very helpful. But some of the specific drawbacks that they found, they were very concerned about how the video would be portrayed to the public. For example, canine officers were really concerned that a dog bite that would look exceptionally graphic if shown to a jury or on television, on the nightly news, and it's going to look awful. And there's no way to make it not look awful. Even if the dog did exactly what the dog was supposed to do and the handler did exactly what they were supposed to do, people are going to look at that and say that's horrific and nobody should ever have to go through that. Or they were concerned about other forms of mature graphic content that would be publicly available. And in Washington in particular, they have very open public records laws, and they were just very concerned about how this would not necessarily how it would play in a negative way, but in how it would, people may not be prepared for what they would see, because policing has some negative sides to it and dark sides to it that maybe people don't necessarily want to see. But they were also concerned about the protecting their informants, that they would be captured on video, and it would be very concerning to them if people were able to figure out that a person had become an informant because suddenly the camera turns off and then they never got arrested, and why did you not get arrested? They were concerned about compromising their tactics. Canines are used in certain ways, maybe to sweep stadiums or things like that for explosives, and they were concerned that if that was the case and that was being recorded, people would know where they do and don't look in a stadium, for example. Or they were concerned, SWAT officers are often concerned about their tactics being available and publicly available to more people with more nefarious, wanting to use them for more nefarious purposes. Some of the specific drawbacks also included incompatibility of equipment, so more technical issues. Like canine officers, traffic officers, a number of them have take-home vehicles, but they had to charge their cameras at the precinct. And so it made it really difficult because they are considered on duty as soon as they cross into the city limits. And so they can be called to a call immediately as soon as they reach the city limits, without having to go to the precinct first. And so they may or may not have their camera with them, but they weren't allowed to charge them at home. And so there were some concerns with that, and how exactly were they supposed to manage that? And they understood why the rules were the way they were, but it really didn't work for their unit and their specific needs. Which brings us to kind of the conclusion of everything. What we really found when we were talking to these units is that there were very nuanced needs for these units. They're not your standard patrol officers, so you can't implement a program in the exact same way. You can't use the same policy. You can't use the same procedures. So those challenges with us, especially policy and procedure, become a little bit more obvious when you're looking at specialty units. The idea that you can't take home a camera to charge becomes more difficult when you're a traffic officer and you take your car home with you, or a canine officer and you take the car home with you. Things like policy issues about when to turn on and off a camera, or various issues related to policies may be more difficult or present more challenges for specialty units. And so one of our recommendations, and this continues to be a recommendation that I make to departments, is when you're deploying a body-worn camera program, you need to come up with a policy and some procedures, and that's very important. But you need to be very flexible when you're implementing among specialty units, because their needs are just going to be different. And be aware of those differences and be willing to work with units. A lot of units have really great ideas for how to make these policy changes, or if we were just able to do this, or if we were just able to do that, this would solve a lot of these problems. And they said, but no one asked us. And so they maybe have made their concerns known, but it just hasn't really resolved in anything. And so if you're implementing a program or you're working with a department who's implementing a program, our recommendation is to certainly come up with a policy and a set of procedures, but be very flexible. So that flexibility is key. Different units have different needs. That's even true within patrol, but certainly when you're looking at specialized units, and certainly when you look into other areas like Criminal Investigations Bureau, placement on their uniform is simply just not going to work if they're in plain clothes, for example. So those kinds of procedures or those policies just need to be flexible. So I think flexibility is the key that comes out of this, but absolutely more research is needed on specialty units and body cameras. More is forthcoming. More has come out since this article was first published. It's available online first, but more research has come out, more is coming. So specialty units are an interesting group to work with and to talk to, and they have not a lot of research on them. If you're looking for a research question in a research area, I highly recommend working with specialty units. They're a fun group to work with, and they really do need some more research about their policies, practices, purposes, their role, their mission. A lot of it is misunderstood or not well understood, and we could certainly learn from that. I hope that you read this article. I hope that you learned a little bit about specialty units and body cameras. And if you have any questions, concerns, you want to talk about it some more, you have ideas, I'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks, and have a great day.